You and I are here today to discuss the upcoming Henry Cejudo doc, but I haven't got to catch up with you in a minute. Troy Letters. Now, you had him on 3 weeks ago. Do you know who that man is? Are you familiar with Troy Letters?
Not. I know him just through the research, but since then, Lehigh people have reached out, and I didn't realize how big he was in that community.
Troy Letters is as tough of a son of a bitch as you're ever going to come across. He would fight Johnny Hendricks to the bitter death and beat him. He beat Johnny Hendricks, and even when he didn't, it was some of the I want to use the word dirty because I don't know another word, but sometimes I don't mean illegal dirty. I just mean these guys. This was a fight. This was an absolute fight. And neither guy would back down. If there was a 7-minute wrestling match, it wasn't 6 minutes and 20 seconds like most matches, and then you find a way to hang in there. These guys fought bell to bell. I mean, some of the most classic matches ever. Letters won the NCAA. He expected to win it 4 times. He was pissed that he didn't win it 4 times. I mean, guys like that, guys like that expect to win. It's like, dude, you shouldn't expect to win. You're 19 years old. Like, knock it off. But they do it. He's one of those guys.
He's one of them, no doubt. When he talked about that match with Hendricks where he'd beaten him for the 2nd time at Lehigh, and Hendricks had the confidence to say, "I'll see you at Nationals." It's like, that's a different cat, man. These guys are just going at it.
Oh, both those guys. The killer in their name, Josh Koscheck, but I don't know that I'd love to know where Koscheck fits into that mix. I think they missed each other, but Letters was one of those guys where USA Wrestling would have put him on the board and thought, okay, he's going to go contend 74 kilograms. And he just didn't do it. Like in freestyle, he just didn't have an interest. He went into coaching, and I've always wondered, did he have an injury? He didn't go MMA. There would have been that opportunity. He didn't go international. Maybe he just had enough. Maybe he just had enough, like Tannenbaum, by example. Yeah. I don't know. But it was very nice to see him pop up on your podcast. And when you were talking to him, I kind of thought, I was like, I don't know if Ryan knows what a badass he's got on the line here.
No,
but he was interesting. I had a real thrill listening to Letters.
I appreciate that. He's great. And since then we've been talking, and he's going to be, I think, someone who comes back on a bunch because, his situation where he was at Penn State, to your point, goes into coaching right away. He's at Penn State with Mark Perry, and I can't remember the other coach who was there with him. And, Chael comes in, and Chael kept him. So that speaks to what he thought of Troy. And, he left to be the head coach at Clarion after 2 years at Penn State, which is crazy. And, but it was awesome to have him on. What do you think of these rule changes? Have you heard about this at all?
You know what? Oh, yeah, I'm up to speed. I must disclose, like, these might be awesome. I am always late to the party on this. I'm a traditionalist, and I just get the way my mind works, and I'm not totally up for change. I don't know that I disagree with the concept. Like, let's take the takedown rule. One of the arguments was, look, if you get 2 takedowns and the other guy has none, it can still be 4-2. That's too close. That's too close for a dominant 2 takedowns to 0. On one hand, I understand that. On the other hand, and this is my MMA more than a wrestling background speaking, the thing that separates the American wrestlers, like, you always see how well wrestling does, right? But that isn't true. The Russians win all the gold medals. They don't do well. The Cubans win a bunch of gold medals. They don't do well. The Germans do just fine. They don't win. It's American wrestling that works in MMA. And the difference is being able to keep somebody down against his will and being able to get away from the bottom when the other guy doesn't want you to. That is what makes us so effective at MMA. So when they started messing with that, I didn't personally love it. There was an argument that the fans, when they're watching writing, don't understand what's happening and find it dull. That might be true. The other side of it is I would rather educate the fans and let them know how gall darn hard it is to keep a man down. You can't lock your hands. It's a hard, incredible skill, particularly when your hips can't be over the top. I don't know, man. They're probably really good rules. I don't like change. That's just the truth.
Do you agree with the assumption that a 3-point takedown will encourage more offensive wrestling from the feet?
Not necessarily. No, not necessarily. I don't. I can't totally dispute it. A push-out rule I was hoping for.
Yes.
The way that they invoke conditioning in collegiate, I respect it, but I do wish that it was a little bit different. I know Iowa used to be the only club that could The only team in America that could sell out a dual meet was Iowa. And they argued that it's because they get a stalling call and they get the other guys tired. And they were wrong. Iowa was wrong. They just had a heart blood. They had some success. They had the right marketing. They were able to fill up arenas. It had nothing to do with them pushing and making another guy tired. I mean, I only offer you that because that's not great. That's not an athletic skill, in my opinion. It's a good strategy, great way to win a wrestling match. Historically, we've proven that true. But I think that Iowa misidentified what people liked about watching them. And I think that it's overplayed in collegiate wrestling. I get conditioning like within any sport, but I prefer the athleticism. It's what I like about freestyle. I mean, I really do. I love to watch collegiate. It's not always about athleticism. You know, a guy gets tired. The human body is not made to go 7 minutes at a full sprint. That's just the truth.
There's nothing better than watching a world championship match where it's like a quarterfinal or a semi, and it doesn't even have to be Americans, but just watching the athleticism in the last 30-second sprint is one of the craziest things you ever see, and you don't see that in folk style as much. So yeah, the three-point takedown to me is kind of out of nowhere. I didn't think that was even a reality. The push out, if you're going to do a three-point takedown, I would think you'd add the push out as well, because otherwise it's just increasing the value of the takedown. Yeah, because I made the stupid argument on Twitter that it's like similar to when we introduced the three-point shot, but then I'm like, well, it would be if we did also offered a push out. But the one thing that I'm really happy about, though, Chael, is they changed the definition of writing from keeping someone down to working for a pin. To me, this should have been in the whole time, and I think it'll get refs to call stalling on top more.
I didn't actually not know that distinction. I read all the rules. I somehow must have gone fast. I read it, 2 swipes get you 2 points and 3 and 4. I thought I read them all. I like what you just said. I like that. I like that clarification a lot. So that is some good news. And I didn't mean to complain about collegiate being, I like that it's the tough guy business. I really do. But I just think there's a point. And I think, it's so heavily loaded to conditioning. It's almost like, hey, before we recruit a kid, I don't need to know if he placed in Fargo. I need to get a VO2 max on him. That's what I need to do. And if he's got a good number, I got a big scholarship for him. So, and by the way, when are we going to get into what's going on with this NIL deal? I mean, we're just buying kids away. You can buy a team now.
So
this
I want to know
what we're seeing in wrestling.
It's crazy. I want to know how much of it's actually happening. Like, is it really happening? Like, how much did Bernie get to go to Penn State?
Bernie's number was $70,000 to get a visit. If just to get a visit, he could visit 5 schools. He told everybody $70,000 for me to come in. If you don't have the $70,000, I'm not coming to look at you. Penn State locked him up before he took those visits, so I could only begin to guess. But I'm just sharing with you. I mean, there's something very cool about that within wrestling. There's another side to it too. But just think about wrestling. We know that this is a poor man's business. So then think about Phil Knight. I'm out here in Oregon. Phil Knight, the owner of Nike. Think about T-Boone Pickens at Oklahoma State. Think about these guys that care about football. If you're willing to give a $250,000 to a kid for one season of wrestling, what are they giving a guy to come play football, a sport that they really are passionate about? I think there's a real relevance. I got the best basketball player in the nation, ranking-wise, is LeBron James's son right now. But the number 2 ranked kid is my neighbor, straight out this window, Jackson Shellstad. He's ranked number 2. And, the money that they're throwing at him, the money that they're offering to dangle him, to get him to come out, it's really quite remarkable. So it's overwhelming. He's a 17-year-old kid. He's got a sister and a mom and dad, and he worked really hard, and he just wants to go play a game and try to have more points than the other guy when time runs out. And it's turned into a business, which it's shocking. The numbers that they're offering the 17-year-old kid, and he commits to the University of Oregon. Duke knows he committed, but committing doesn't mean what it used to mean when I was coming through. Now it has to be a letter of intent. So Duke says, hey, to hell with that press release. Come on out here. We got more for you. Then Kentucky finds that, and they bring, I'm telling you, it's a different world.
Hundreds of thousands. Hundreds of thousands.
And it's guaranteed. All 5, you want to come red shirt, go ahead. You don't want a red shirt, no problem.
Wow.
Guaranteed. And it's really impressive numbers. And then you got the tricks in there too. I mean, we can get to the dirty stuff. There's a school that bought a kid that was an NCAA finalist this year. I'll leave it at that. They gave him $100,000, but they gave him no scholarship. They said our 9.9er visit would give you $100,000 to come here. They didn't cover the scholarship. Well, he's an out-of-state kid. That's going to run him about $80,000, and he doesn't understand. It would be my guess that he's got to pay taxes on that original $100,000. So now all of a sudden you're upside down about $25,000. I mean, this becomes a real problem when you're dealing with these kids, and you know,
there
needs
a way to police
be
it?
something done, right?
How do you police it?
I'm not sharing. I'm not sharing that you do away with it. There's something right here. There is something wrong about not giving your principals any cut, but I don't know. I mean, is the answer an escrow account? Is the answer, you know, that's what they did with Kyle Snyder. Kyle Snyder was a millionaire wrestler before the NIL deal. They didn't know if he could have the money. They didn't know if the NCAA would allow Kyle Snyder to have all of that money. So what they did is they just stuck it in an escrow account, didn't give it to him. The second he walked off the mat after beating Gwizdowski and was graduated, he was a millionaire. And that might have been the right way to do it. I think they probably would have let him have it, but I'm just sharing for you. Yeah. It also had a couple of built-in mechanisms, which is now he's 23 years old. Now he's got a degree. Now he's a little bit more prepared. And there's an argument. There's an argument to be said for that, man. These 17 and 18-year-old kids, they just simply don't know about taxes. They just don't know what that means, and they could find themselves in a real jam.
And the whole world of wrestling is propped up by less than 20 super rich cats who are giving money to a number of things: Beat the Streets, RTCs, wrestling programs. So to me, there's only so much money to go around.
Right. And you know, you asked me what Bernie got. His number was 70 to take a visit. Shane Griffith's number is 200. And you know, I'm looking at it and I'm going, oh, okay, but there's only 5 coaches in the entire NCAA, head coaches, that make that or more. There's only 5 of them. That's a big ticket. And I'm okay with him going and trying to get it. Yeah, for 1 year. But what I'm sharing with you is when they were going to drop Stanford wrestling, Stanford went out and raised, it was like $12 million. It was a very impressive number. It might have been $14 million. They raised a lot of money from their alumni. And the reason I say that is the school didn't take them up on it, right? We tried to buy wrestling back. The school did not take them up. They just brought wrestling back. When they got caught, what they were doing with the mission scandals, they just tried to unwind the tape. So where's that $12 million? Because Stanford could really use it. You're telling me a school as rich as Stanford can't afford to keep the one and only champion that they've ever had? I find that to be a surprise. And meanwhile, you're telling me that Penn State is raising all the money? What about Cornell? What about Princeton, where you got these businessmen and you got these senators? And I mean, I'm just sharing for you that it is a little bit of a surprise that Stanford, that's got 14 million somewhere, couldn't keep their only champion in history. And then there's a rumor that he doesn't get along great with Rob Cole. You want to know what I think? I think Rob Cole's going to be on the first thing smoking to Oklahoma if he gets the offer.
That's another thing. Oklahoma right now, a lot of open things in wrestling right now. It's exciting. The one thing I really can't wait, and we're getting ahead of ourselves a few years, but when the time comes where Carter Sirachi and Kyle Dake and Nolf, I guess, is going to be in there as well, that room at Penn State is going to be freaking crazy. And Carter, I know you love him. I love your videos on him. He's a heel, man.
Jordan Burroughs will not leave this sport until that match happens. And I don't know that he can. I mean, Jordan Burroughs has never been called. Kyle Dake didn't call him out. I mean, he chased him down. They're the same age and same weight class. This is completely different. And, so many people thought, okay, well, after this Olympics, Burroughs will be done, or after this accomplishment, or after another world championship. And I'm telling you, set those things aside. He will not leave until that match happens. And I don't know that he can. I think he's got to. I think he's got to wrestle Sirachi.
It's going to be awesome. I hope it happens. And yeah. A lot of big names going on right now, and U.S. Open's coming up. Let's get to this story, man. This all started last June. You and I were talking, and we had discussed different people who to do this documentary on, and you're like, I think Henry could be a name. Get that MMA crossover, and one thing led to another, and kind of picked up steam in July, August, and then September we were rolling, and here we are. All 6 episodes go live on Monday, man. I just want to say thank you for getting this seed planted.
You're very welcome, and I appreciate that you included me. I got to hear some screeners. I heard you thank me and give me credit for that. That meant a lot. I got to tell you, my friendship with Henry, I value and appreciate, and we get along very well. My respect for Henry is very different now. I did not understand what he had to go through as a young man. I did not understand that he was the best wrestler in America and did not know if he was going to have dinner that night. it was a very big deal. And, you know, your pieces always do this. The first docuseries I ever heard was with the Smiths. But before you know it, John starts talking about Leroy and Gable's influence within the arbitration. I mean, we start getting stuff going, oh, wait a minute. That's never come up. And you start learning these things. The young man from Northern Iowa, I think he's your favorite wrestler ever, yeah. Tony. But I didn't know that he was getting recruited by the streets. And I didn't know that at one point in his life they won, that they got him. And, you know, it was a really big deal. And then to hear that he straightened his life out. Now he's a teacher, which means he's teaching some of the lessons that he wished he hadn't have done. The most effective teachers are the ones that something like that happened to. It was just an amazing story. But the same is true here with Henry. If you think you know Henry Cejudo, you think you know the Henry Cejudo story, you don't. You're going to learn some things, and they're compelling, and they're even moving.
Appreciate that, man. And I can't wait to get it out there. For folks who only know Henry from the wrestling world, your world is MMA, and what he's done there might be even more impressive. Why is his story so important for the MMA world?
Well, and he's not done. He's not done, right? I mean, he's one of these guys that's supposed to be a wrestler. And the NCAA has a number of rules, but if you pay attention to him, one of them, by example, is you have 5 years to complete 4. You can get a break for church mission or military service. However, all your years must be completed by the time you're 26. And yes, if I lost you there, just accept it. But Henry Cejudo was the Olympic champion, still would have had 4 years. He could have gone to any university in the country. His grades weren't wonderful. They would have worked it out. Princeton would have found a way to get him in because of the Olympic championship, and he just wasn't what he wanted to do. And I didn't know that he wanted to do MMA. He had a good eye on wrestling. He even attempted to make a comeback. Nick Simmons brought a halt to that in 2012. And then Henry said, you know what? Maybe I will go give this a try. He boxed a little bit in his youth. A typical Mexican upbringing. There was always a boxing gym in town. I'm repeating Henry here. And he just had these skills, you know, very similar to like what we heard with Aaron Pico, but Henry came along first. And it was really interesting. And so he didn't start out as a natural. As a matter of fact, you know, he lost a couple of fights, but one of them was a stoppage to the guy who he went on to defeat for his first world championship, and Demetrius Johnson, right? Like there was some adversity and there was a learning curve for Henry, but it was the typical Henry Cejudo where he was not going to accept defeat. He was not going to accept second best. He was just a winner, and he just kept striving. Then you have him after he sets all the records, you know, champ status, which technically makes him champ because of the freestyle medal was at a different weight class, 121, 125, 135. The champ is a phrase coined for different weight classes. So he's technically got 3, but now he wants 4. He wants to go after Volkanovski. And it's just a really incredible story. You know, what drives this guy? What makes him hungry? I've never had this level of success, but I would imagine if I climbed a mountain and then I climbed it again and I climbed it again, I'm probably done climbing it. I probably don't have that motivation, but he's different, right? He's different. Here's something that makes him special. And this docuseries will help to unveil what that is.
Yeah. And if you think about what Henry has, a lot of that's Terry Brands. We're talking about one of the craziest, most intense people there is. And he basically raised Henry. It's like it makes a lot of sense when you start to understand who the influences were.
I loved that, and I wish that Terry was still involved, and I know that Henry does too. I know Henry early in his career wanted Terry there. He wanted Terry in his corner, and Terry just said, hey, you know, I don't do this, not what I do. And Henry said, I don't need you to do it. You don't ever have to be in the room with me ever. When it's time to walk out, I want you there with me. And I don't think that Terry quite understood, you know, as successful as Terry and Tom are, they are humble. They really don't understand what their presence alone means and what their influence means. So, I mean, Henry really did want Terry there. And I don't think that Terry quite knows how involved he is with Henry's success. I think when Henry tells him, you have a piece of this gold medal, I think Terry thinks that's just something polite that a guy is saying, but it's not. It's different. If you ever talk with Henry privately, as you did, it's very sincere. Henry Cejudo does not exist, not the champion, not without Terry.
And I think even guys like DC, who to me are mega, even he gets excited when Terry texts him. I was with him at his office and he's like, Terry texted me after one of my fights and I couldn't believe it. I was like starstruck. It's like, that's what to your point exactly. I don't think they realize the impact they have. because they're so in their own bubble.
If I may insert myself, but I got an email from him one time just wishing me luck. And I even wrote the person back. I said, hey, thanks a lot if this is really you. And I never heard from him again. Well, then I found out Frank Popolizio had him do it. Frank, it was Terry. But it is a cool thing. Like, there are some guys that there is just a power with their presence. I mean, I could only imagine. You're right. If out of nowhere, John Smith's in my corner and telling, I mean, it's things are going to be different. Believe they just are. And there's not a lot of human beings like that, but they do exist, and Terry's one of them.
And one of the things I was really excited about this documentary is when a MMA fan listens who doesn't know about wrestling, one of the misconceptions is in the jiu-jitsu world, for example, there's like 30 world champs, right? I'm exaggerating, but there's tons of different world champs. And wrestling, there's one world champ. There's one Olympic champ. Break that down for people who don't really maybe understand that in the MMA circles. Or I guess jiu-jitsu.
Most forms of combat. Well, and I'll tell you this, in most forms of combat, even I'm not jiu-jitsu specifically, but combat, I mean, think of boxing that you see on television. Think of MMA that you see on television. If you are a champion, whatever your award is, but if you are a champion, every time you compete, that's on the line, right? It doesn't work that way in wrestling. You can beat a world champion. You don't get to become one. You can beat 7 world champions. You don't get to become one. You look at what Kyle Dake did, who was clearly the best wrestler on earth, but he had some kind of an ailment, at the Olympic Games. Rumor is that his ribs. It was very obviously there was something. He's never told us because he's too much of a man. But the point is, he doesn't get to be Olympic champion, but he's beaten a lot of them. You know, you have to do it on this specific day at this specific time. And it really is different to have one in our community. We've got one, and there's been people that have tried to come along and put some initials and call it a world championship. And we even had some good wrestlers go out there and contend, but they did not look at themselves as world champions. They knew. We knew, and whether it was those crooks at Fila or now we got the good guys of UWW. Back in the day, it was, AAU, but we know what our championship is. We as a community select one day, one event every year, and we contest it. And it's quite possibly the coolest thing about our community. We've had people come in with money and try to buy it away and buy world championships, but just not the way it works. It's not the way it works. The process is long and it's grueling. And to your point, there is only one.
And when you think about the Olympics, it gets even smaller. It's only in 2008, we only had 6 Olympians. Think about out of all the folk style, all the freestyle wrestlers, just amazing to get down to 6.
Yeah. Well, it's really tough. When I was born, it was 12. It became 10 over my lifetime. It became 8. Now it became 6. To put that in perspective, when they dropped it to 6, Dan Gable, the leading voice in our sport, came out and told the world, if you're going to drop it again, just cut the sport completely. I don't want to be involved in something that has no opportunity. I can't tell kids to go through this struggle and go through this sacrifice if there's no opportunity. And, we stopped at 6, and I really think that needs to be on our agenda with our wrestling leaders to start fighting to get it back. They made a threat that they were going to get rid of wrestling completely. And when they made that and they didn't follow through on it, it was a real natural element for all of our wrestlers, including our leadership, to say, okay, great, we're going to keep our mouths shut. We're going to keep everybody happy. We're not going to do any complaining. And I think it was a mistake. I really think that, we should be fighting to get those 8 back, those 10 back, those 12 back that I talk about. They got done for World Year. It can most definitely be done. Generally, when you're trying to add something to an Olympic sport, you have to come down to how can we organize it? Who can facilitate it? Do you literally have the facility to house and do this? And the World Championships proves to the IOC, yes, we have the ability to organize this.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, when you look at the kind of the whole story and the whole picture, one of the coolest things to me is that Henry's comeback fight is against a wrestler himself, Aljamain Sterling, who I like a lot. I do like Aljo. And leading up to this, being so invested in Henry's life, I found myself taking the other side, and obviously seeing Aljo as the enemy is a little bit, which is obviously for sport, but this fight getting booked took forever. I could not believe this fight got pushed to as far as it did. Thank God it did, because I never would have been ready in time, but this thing's happening. And let's just sign off with this. What are your thoughts on this matchup as 2 former wrestlers here?
And what an interesting point, right? Like, we'll probably never get the real truth from Aljo. He's got to get himself in a mindset. He's got to convince himself, hey, this isn't wrestling. This is fighting. This is something different. He's the best in the world. But if I was to put myself in his spot, I'm a wrestler. I love that's what I look up to. I know how grueling it is. I made it to a certain level. If I've got to take on the Olympic champion, I'm going to admire him. I probably watched him. I might have owned his shoes and or a T-shirt. And I think that Aljo does have to overcome that. Now, Aljo's a competitor. He's a dog. He's a world champion. He can do it. Don't forget, Aljo's the guy that walked out and took on RBY a year ago just because somebody put on an event and Aljo showed up and took the beating, but he showed up and took on RBY. So
true.
I mean, Aljo deserves his. Yeah, he deserves his credit. I'll just share for you that I think that there's a piece of him that likely would rather cheer for Henry than have to go punch him in the face.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then hopefully, Henry gets this one, and then maybe Volkanovski. We'll see. Hopefully there's many more to come, man. It's been awesome to see it.
By the way, can I throw something at you?
Yeah.
I feel like you're wrapping me up, but can I just ask a question? Chris Campbell, did you enjoy that conversation?
I enjoyed it. Yeah, absolutely.
He was such a legend. It was such an interesting story. He was the world champion. And then, he comes back and makes the team in 92, which was Barcelona. They called him Grandpa. All the athletes, not just the wrestlers, because he was so old. He ends up getting the bronze medal there. It's a weight class called 198 pounds, which we currently don't have anymore. But, he was just such an impressive force, but it was such a unique story of a guy that was here and left and came back. And you can talk about comeback stories, but you on one hand, you wouldn't fill it up to talk about the wrestling ones. It's one of those sports, man. If you leave for a week, things are different. If you leave for a month, you might never get your spot back. This guy left for almost a decade, came back, made the team, got a medal. I mean, he is one of the unsung heroes, in my opinion. And I appreciate that you had him on. He wanted to become a lawyer. He was the head of USA Boxing. I don't know if he got into that with you. Like what Rich Bender is for wrestling, he was for boxing because they respected him as an athlete. They respected him as an organizer and a leader. The degree in jurisprudence, of course, helped the resume. But Chris Campbell's really quite a special guy.
Yeah, and there's a Sports Illustrated article from the 70s that's like this perfect time capsule about Chris Campbell. And if we only talked about that, it would have been fascinating. But in the 70s, he didn't own a chair. He had like mattresses on the floor. Like he was a really kind of like different thinking guy. And a lot of those guys who wrestled in that 1980s era with that 80s boycott, there's a lot of dark stories that go on there. People who never got their shot in. Chris Campbell almost became one of those because by 84, you have Mark Schultz, you have all these, like you said, this new crop coming in. And then he comes back after Mark Schultz retires, wins a world title. It's like, man, like there's so many guys from that 78, 79, 80 who you'd never hear about again, but he came back. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and that's a match I believe that never happened. They were in the same bracket together. I know they were in the same bracket in 1980 Olympic trials, but Mark been a young guy, maybe a redshirt freshman. That match never actually happened, but boy, if it did. I mean, that would be one for the ages. You take a 1983, 1986 Chris Campbell, you put him opposite Mark the Monster Schultz. Man. That's just one that got away, man. It's just one that got away.
What are you hearing on Gable? Is he done with WWF or is he still doing that? Like, what do you make of this whole comeback?
Well, okay, this is a tough one. I predicted this, or I've told people what my inside scoop, however you want to say it. But I've been very bullish that Gable is going to wrestle. Gable was in the room. Gable was a tremendous leader out there in Minnesota this year, and there was rumors that he was going to come back for the NCAA. My prediction was if he comes back for the NCAA, right, and that would be Vince's call. If Vince decides this publicity and this exposure through the Big Ten Network flow, people like yourself, if this is more bang for the buck than we can get him, Vince is going to keep him around for Paris. I'd have to tell people that, hey, don't forget, the Olympics weren't in 20. They were in 2021. We're almost back to the Olympics. And if they bring him out now, they're going to keep him around for the games. When he didn't come out, when he didn't enter the Big Ten, it burst my bubble. I thought, well, that's just not going to happen. You have tremendous exposure for the NCAA. By example, it's on ESPN, and the World Championships will be on .com. It's done. It's not going to happen. And so to see him come out, and I was hearing from Minnesota. I got a call 2 weeks ago Gable has not missed a practice in 6 weeks. Now, all season long, he was in there a couple days a week. But then I hear, no, he hasn't missed a practice, and that includes morning practice. He's done daily doubles every day for 6 weeks. That's now been 8 weeks. And, the Open is next week. So when he came out and he reported that, yeah, I was pretty pumped up about it. He's, of course, taking it one step at a time, which is, this season of the World Championships. But I feel very comfortable in telling you he's going to go through the Olympics. I mean, if he wins the Worlds, you think that would catapult him, but you want to know what will catapult him if he doesn't win the Worlds. If he doesn't make the team or he doesn't win, you better believe he's coming back.
Yeah, I mean, you think about, it's interesting that he wouldn't wrestle at the NCAAs considering how close it is, because the U.S. Open is probably one of the least watched events, comparatively. So, like, would you have expected him to be like doing WWF Monday Night Raw at this point, or is he not on that track anymore?
Well, no, he is. He is. Okay. And I looked in there. Yeah, because I heard that he was in the room. Don't forget that the WWE's training center is in Florida. Just use Tracy Hancock by example. But that's where he went out to. So I share with you, when I heard that Gable's in the room a couple of times a week, first off, I loved it because I did have a concern that he wasn't going to get his degree. And I know that to his father, that degree was important. So what I was told, and I believe this to be accurate, is that WWE actually sent people to him. They got him in wrestling school in Minnesota. So the couple of days a week that he was in the Gopher room, well, the other days he was working. It was just a different kind of work. He was running the ropes, but plenty of powerlifting. You can see that by looking at him, how fit he is. You can see how damn strong he is. His neck's gotten even bigger as he's doing that interview. I mean, it really is an intimidating thing. But I love what you said about the NCAA, because I see it the same way. If it's an exposure grab, that was your move. And in all fairness, the NCAA is harder than even the Olympics. And people think that Gable had such a hard time in the Olympics because he wins that by 0.2 of a second. You go back and watch that match. He gave up 4 points in a gut wrench in about in a one exchange. You take those 2 gut wrenches away, he kicked that guy's ass. Oh, and by the way, in the semifinals, he had the defending Olympic champion and he teched him, and nobody talks about that. NBC didn't cover it because it was the semifinals. Gable Steveson technical fault at 20 years old. He technical fault the reigning defending Olympic champion. The Worlds and the Olympics were not close for Gable. They were not close at all. He ran through that, regardless of the way you remember it, because of that 2/10 of a second takedown. He kicked everybody's ass.
And let's not forget, the ultimate poll of all time is coming up in 2028 when the Olympics are in LA. So anyone who wins in 24, all of those guys, I don't care who it is, how old they are, they're all thinking maybe a comeback in 28 in LA, just like 96 in Atlanta was such a legendary one. So that's coming up as well.
Absolutely. And by the way, as you're running through, stars that are coming back, look, if we can get Spencer Lee in this tournament, and I think that we are gonna get Gable in this tournament, we have something real special to look forward to. But the way the wrestling is structured to take all of our medalists out of the U.S. Open, it's disappointing. It's not what the Open used to be. I'll tell you a great story. Okay, so take the U.S. Open of the way that this verbiage is done. The winner of the U.S. Open will draw into, and then, fill in the blank if you're a returning world medalist. The year was 1996. The Olympics were going to be in Atlanta. There was a young man named Zeke Jones, and Zeke Jones got to sit until the finals. He won the U.S. Open. He got to sit. Rules were a little different back then. He gets to sit until the final wrestle-up. They have a last chance qualifier. Now, everybody in wrestling knows who's going to enter at what qualifier. They kind of get their ducks in a row. If you're a top guy, you go here and I'll enter over here. And they all move on. So they get to the last chance qualifier, and there's a young man who was a couple-time champion out of Clemson named Sam Henson. And everybody knew at 114.5 pounds, Sam Henson, who missed the Open, is going to go and qualify for the trials at this event. Zeke Jones shows up, throws down a registration fee and sits on the scale. So USA Wrestling even grabs him. Right there at the scale, they grab him and go, Zeke, you must understand the rules. You don't have to be here. You're already in the finals. And Zeke's mind, the hardest guy was going to be Sam. And if he comes out and he takes Sammy out at this tournament, it's one match. If he waits till the trials, he's got to beat him twice in one day. So Zeke went in. He did beat Sam Henson. He kept Sam Henson out of the trials. And the reason I bring that to you is I'd be very curious what this verbiage is. Because if the verbiage is the same that it was in 96, regardless of the intent, in theory, a Burroughs or a Date could come and enter this and he would be done. He would draw into himself. Now, I'm sure they fixed the verbiage, but I'm not positive. I know they have intents all the time at USAW, but it doesn't work out. And I only bring that to you for fun. I'm just telling you that Zeke did it at 96, and I'm highly curious if you could come in and qualify to take on yourself at Final X. Just bringing that to your attention.
I love it. It's so counter to how everyone's thinking now. Like, no one is thinking about entering more tournaments, but that would be, I didn't know that story, for one. And it's gotten a lot better this year. The US Open, they used to have the World Team Trials. We took that out. Final X used to be in 3 cities. Now it's in 1. It's gotten a lot better. And just look at how big the US Open is this year. It's legit, and I can't wait for it. And I can't remember US Open I've said that for.
Yep. No, hey, I fully agree with you. And with Spencer and with Gable, that'll be special. Where I was going with that when I got sidetracked is just to remind you that Rulon Gardner, as of right now, is claiming he's going to be at the Open. He has not registered. Last time I checked registration, he had not registered, but he is openly telling people that, and he is in training, that part's true. He's openly telling people that he will be part of the US Open. So that's fun and cool. Let's see if it happens.
Let's see if it happens, man. I can't wait to watch. And all this talk about people coming back, it kind of reminds me of when Chael did it that one year. That's a story in its own self. But now, Chael, it's awesome to catch up, man. This is long overdue with the NCAAs, and I know you put out a lot of content on the Spencer Lee situation, and I love the channel, man. So appreciate all the support as always.
2011 is the single worst day of wrestling Chael Sanderson has ever had. He was tired, he was lethargic, and he took out 4 NCAA champs and the defending silver medalist all in the same day. The worst day of wrestling I've ever seen out of him. He took out 4 champs and the reigning silver medalist. That's how good Chael Sanderson is.
He's so good. Jake Herbert in his prime. Scary.
It was 2 out of 3 rounds. Remember that when it was best of 3 rounds? Chael never went 6 minutes. He never went. No one, including Jake, made it 6 minutes. No one. Not only did nobody beat him, they didn't win one of those rounds. Chael was out of there in 4 minutes, match after match after match.
Yeah, this Henry doc is in that same horrible rule set, and it's so bizarre to watch these matches and how horrendous it all used to be to watch. Like the ball grab, all of it's just messy, very messy.
Yeah. No, it's a mess. It's a mess. It's very frustrating. You know, Nick Simmons is the one that stopped Cejudo at the Olympic trials that year. And at the Olympic trials, Nick Simmons beat the defending Olympic champion, the defending NCAA champion, and that year's Olympian all in the same day and didn't make the team. You know, and to remind you, because he went 2 out of 3 with Hayes. So he beat Hayes, who went on to be the Olympian. He beat the defending Olympic champion. I think it was Ramos. He beat the NCAA champion, beat all 3 of them in the same day and doesn't make the Olympic team. Very frustrating, man. It's a tough business they're in.
Tough, very tough, man. It's changed a long way too with all the money. I mean, it's funny, back in 08, all these guys were making no money, none. I mean, it's certainly, you know, from your era, early 2000s, no money then either. It's changed a lot.
Don't you agree with me on my point though with Shane Griffith? 200 is his number. But
I heard,
Stanford doesn't have
but
it. I mean, if Stanford doesn't have it,
I don't think it's a money thing. I think he can't get into grad school there.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay.
He's a graduate.
Okay. Again, I mean, I would just think that there would be exceptions for their first and only national champ. I would just think that.
Well, this only came up because Northwestern, you know, I'm an Illinois guy. I love all Illinois programs. And Northwestern lost like 3 guys in a week. And I'm like, what's going on here? Like, this is Big Ten power, academic power. What the heck's going on? And like 2 of the 3 were grad transfers, which only is coming up because these guys have been eligible so long because of COVID. And they just flat out can't get into grad school at Northwestern. So I'm like, that makes sense. Sure. I've heard that's what it is at Stanford, but I can't be sure.
All right. I hear you on that. We'll live and learn, man.
Absolutely, brother. Good to talk to you, Chael. We'll talk to you soon, man.
Take care. Congrats on the documentary. Can't wait to hear it. See you, bro.
Take care.